Smack. Smack. Two loud slaps landed across my face in the middle of the wedding I had paid for. My glasses flew to the floor. My cheek burned. For a few seconds, I didn't even breathe. Around me, music stopped. The ballroom full of shining lights, flowers, and 200 guests went quiet. Everyone stared. My future daughter-in-law, Savannah, stood there in her white gown, her eyes cold and sharp. She screamed, "Why does an old woman need so much space? Hand over the apartment keys." For a moment, no one spoke. The guests whispered. Some covered their mouths. I saw pity in some eyes, amusement in others. My son, Caleb, stood beside her. He didn't move. He didn't defend me. His head was down, and my heart cracked. I am Beatrice Monroe. I'm 69 years old, widowed for more than 12 years. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment near the river outside Nashville. My life is simple. Every morning, I wake up at 6, make my black coffee, and drive to the flower shop where I work part-time. I come home to water my balcony plants, geraniums and lavender. That's my piece. To my neighbors, I'm just the friendly widow who shares leftover flowers. To Caleb, I'm his old mom living on a pension. And to Savannah, I'm nothing but an obstacle between her and my apartment. But tonight, the night that should have been full of joy, I became her target. When she slapped me, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stood there, feeling the fire in my cheek and the cold in my heart. People whispered, "How rude," at her own wedding. Others said, "Maybe the old woman should give up the place." Their words stabbed deeper than the slaps. Savannah's great-aunt smirked at me. Her friends giggled like children. And my son, my only son, said nothing. Not a word. Not even my name. He looked like he wanted to disappear. I stared at him, searching for the boy who once promised to protect me. But that boy was gone. I bent down, picked up my glasses piece by piece. My hand was shaking, but my back stayed straight. I didn't speak. I reached into my black purse and took out my phone. There was one number saved under Victor Plan B. I pressed it and said quietly, "It's time. Come now." Then I hung up. No one knew what those words meant, but I did. You see, everyone in that room thought I was poor. They thought I lived on pennies. They thought I had nothing but that little apartment. But they were wrong. I had spent years pretending to be simple, quiet, small, all to protect myself. My husband Harold used to say, "Beatrice, real wealth is peace. Keep quiet about what you have. Silence protects you better than money." I believed him. After he passed, I never told Caleb the truth. I never said that Harold left me more than enough. Investments, bonds, even a small office building in town. I let my son believe I only had a pension. I wanted him to learn to stand on his own. But that silence, that cover, became my cage. Savannah saw weakness, not wisdom. I still remember the first time she came to my apartment. It was raining. She wore a red coat and smiled too wide. She looked around my living room like a buyer inspecting a house. "It's small," she said sweetly, "but cozy." Her eyes scanned the corners, the old furniture, the yellow oven, the balcony. I smiled and served tea. After that day, her voice started echoing through Caleb. He began saying things like, "Mom, you don't need 2 bedrooms. Maybe you should move somewhere easier." He thought he was being caring, but I heard Savannah's words behind his lips. Still, I stayed silent. I kept my morning coffee routine. I smiled at customers at the flower shop. I kept watering my balcony plants. I thought peace would win. I was wrong. Savannah grew bolder. Every visit, she brought new brochures, senior homes, full care facilities, places with smiling nurses and shiny rooms. She said it would be better for me. I asked, "In my apartment?" She smiled. "You could sell it, of course. You'd live comfortably for years." But I knew she wasn't thinking about my comfort. She was thinking about the sale. Caleb slowly began to agree. "Mom," he said one evening, "maybe it's time you had people to help you every day. Why keep that big place?" I wanted to scream because it's my home, but I didn't. I smiled and said, I'm fine, until one night I overheard them whispering. Savannah's voice was soft but sharp. Don't worry. Once she moves out, we can sell it. That'll cover our debts and maybe the wedding too. Debts. Wedding. Apartment. My life reduced to numbers. I couldn't sleep that night. The rain hit the window, and I stared at the dark ceiling, realizing the truth. My son and his fiancée were planning to take what I had worked for all my life. Not by asking, but by pushing. Slowly. So I called an old friend, Nora Delgado, a real estate agent who knows everything about property in Nashville. Nora, I said, I need to know what Caleb and Savannah are up to. Quietly. 3 days later, Nora met me at a cafe. She looked serious. She placed a file in front of me. Beatrice, she said softly, they're drowning in debt. Over $100,000 in credit cards, behind on rent. And they use your name as guarantor for some payments, without telling you. My stomach turned. I opened the file and saw numbers, receipts, and one note in red ink, wedding loan. I felt the blood leave my face. My own son had used my name. That evening, I sat in my living room with the lights off, holding that file. My hands were cold, but my mind was burning. Harold's picture on the shelf seemed to look at me. His voice echoed in my memory. When you're pushed into a corner, that's when you find out who you are. I whispered, Harold, I think it's time. The next morning, I called Victor Hale, Harold's old financial advisor and one of the few people I trust. He answered on the second ring. Beatrice, he said, I've been expecting this call. He didn't ask questions. He just said, come by my office tomorrow. We'll prepare everything. When I arrived, he laid out a thick file, all my assets, hidden investments, deeds. You've been too kind, he said. It's time to protect yourself. Together, we formed a plan. I would transfer my assets into a trust, stop all silent payments I'd been making to Caleb, and prepare evidence, every transaction, every signature, every debt. And we'd reveal it all only when it mattered most. When? Victor asked. At the wedding, I said. He raised an eyebrow, then smiled. That'll be one for the ages. I went home, opened my cabinet, and took out an old brown box. Inside were Harold's documents, investment papers, and a few things I'd saved for years. I sorted them neatly and placed them into a thick folder, the chestnut file. That night, I messaged my neighbor, Mrs. Whitaker. If I text you during the wedding, bring the chestnut file to the ballroom. She replied instantly, I'll be there, Beatrice. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, looking at the moon's reflection on the river. My heart ached. I still loved my son, but I also knew love without respect destroys a person. Morning came. The air smelled of rain and roses. I put on my best blue dress, tied my silver hair, and looked in the mirror. You can do this, I told myself. You're not weak. You're not done. The wedding at Riverton Grand was grand indeed. Crystal chandeliers, white roses, golden ribbons. I smiled when people greeted me, though my chest felt tight. I had planned this entire event, the food, the flowers, the band, because I wanted my son to have a beautiful memory. I never imagined it would turn into my battlefield. Then came the moment. Savannah's slap, the second one louder than the first. Guests gasped. I stood frozen, then straightened my back. Inside, something broke, but something stronger woke up. I didn't yell. I didn't hit back. I walked to the hallway, pulled out my phone, and sent one message. Victor, come now. 20 minutes later, the ballroom doors opened. Victor stepped in wearing a black suit, holding his briefcase. The whisper started. Who's that? What's happening? Savannah looked confused, then annoyed. Victor walked straight toward me and nodded. Ready? He asked quietly. I nodded back. My hands no longer shook. My heart was steady. He went to the stage and took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice rang out, calm and clear. I am Victor Hale, financial advisor to Mrs. Beatrice Monroe. I have an announcement. The music stopped. Every eye turned. Savannah frowned. Caleb looked pale. Victor continued, All financial guarantees for this wedding have been canceled effective immediately. Gasps spread like fire. The venue manager rushed forward. Victor handed him a paper. Additionally, the monthly financial support Mrs. Monroe has provided to her son and his wife for 2 years, a total of $4,000 per month, is also suspended. Savannah screamed, "She's lying. She's broke. She's just jealous." I stepped forward slowly. My heels clicked against the marble floor. I opened my purse and took out the chestnut file. I laid the documents on the podium: property deeds, investment statements, legal papers. "This," I said quietly but firmly, "is the truth. I am not poor. I simply chose to live simply. And you, Savannah, mistook my silence for weakness." The crowd murmured. Phones rose. Flashes went off. I saw Caleb's face, pale, shocked, ashamed. I looked at him. "You forgot respect, son," I said, "so I had to remember it for you." The room fell silent again. Savannah's hands trembled. She shouted, "Fake! You're faking all this." Victor lifted another envelope. "Certified copies from the law office," he said. "Every word is real." The manager glanced through the papers and nodded. "If that's true," he said, "the remaining payment for this event must be made immediately." Savannah's mouth fell open. Caleb's shoulders sank. I stood tall, feeling the years of pain lift from my chest. For so long, I had lived pretending to be small. That night, under the chandelier's glow, I felt big again, not because of money, but because I found my voice. As guests whispered and phones recorded, Savannah's perfect wedding turned into her reckoning. Caleb tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. His lips moved, but I didn't hear him. I only heard my heartbeat slow, steady, alive. And then, as I looked around that glittering room full of gasps and flashes, I realized something. This wasn't just my fight. It was the fight of every mother, every older woman who had ever been disrespected in silence. The truth had just walked into the room, and it wasn't leaving quietly. Whispers rippled through the ballroom like wind through dry leaves. Guests turned their heads, phones steel raised. I could feel every pair of eyes fixed on me. Some were shocked, some amazed, and some embarrassed that they had believed Savannah's lies. Savannah's perfect wedding glow was gone. Her lipstick trembled, her face pale beneath the lights. Caleb stood beside her, still frozen. I had spent my whole life protecting him from pain, but this time he had to face it. Victor stepped closer to the mic. His voice was calm and firm. "To make this clear," he said, "Mrs. Monroe has been the sole financial support behind this couple for 2 years. Every dollar they've spent, from their rent to their wedding, is money she provided." The crowd gasped. People began to whisper louder. "She paid for everything? Even this wedding?" I heard someone mutter, "That poor woman. Imagine being slapped by the people you fed." Savannah's hand flew to Caleb's arm. "Stop him," she hissed. But Caleb didn't move. He looked sick, trapped between shame and disbelief. Victor opened another envelope and laid the documents across the podium. "These," he continued, "are certified statements showing the payments $157,000 in total, proof that Mrs. Monroe has carried the full financial weight of her son's new life." I watched with Savannah's face twist. She grabbed the papers and tried to tear them, but the venue manager snatched them back. "These are official documents," he said sharply. Savannah's voice broke. You planned this." I met her eyes. "No," I said softly. "You planned to take my home. I planned to keep my dignity." The room went silent again. Even the musicians stood still, instruments hanging in the air. Then a slow clap started from the back, a woman, maybe in her 50s. Then another joined, and another. Within seconds, the hall filled with applause. It wasn't the kind of applause you hear after a speech. It was raw, emotional, like people were clapping for every mother who'd ever been silenced. Savannah's tears started to fall, smearing her makeup. She turned to Caleb. "Say something. Do something." Caleb looked at me, eyes wide and wet. "Mom, please." "Not here. Not like this." I felt a tear rise, but blinked it away. "Here," I said quietly, "is exactly where it needs to happen." The venue manager cleared his throat. "Without payment, we can't continue the event." Savannah screamed, "This is my wedding day." But the staff began to move, the lights dimmed, waiters froze mid-step, and the music stopped completely. I turned away from the chaos and started walking toward the exit. My steps were slow, steady. For years I had felt small. Tonight I felt tall again. Outside, the night air was cool. The city lights shimmered on the river. I took a deep breath and whispered, "It's over." But I was wrong. It wasn't over at all. It was only beginning. 3 days later, my phone rang nonstop. Caleb called again and again. When I finally answered, his voice cracked. "Mom, why did you do this? You humiliated us in front of everyone." I closed my eyes. "Caleb, you humiliated me first when you chose silence." He went quiet. Then his tone changed, sharp. "You don't understand. We needed that apartment. We're drowning." "Savannah is," I cut in. "Savannah is not your problem. She's your choice." He hung up. That evening, Savannah texted me. Her message was venom. "You'll regret this. We'll take you to court. We'll prove you're not fit to handle your own affairs." I smiled sadly. She still didn't understand who she was dealing with. A week later, a letter arrived, official, pulled, and stamped. It was a petition. Caleb and Savannah had filed for a competency evaluation, claiming I was no longer mentally stable. They wanted control of my assets. I sat at the kitchen table staring at it. My hands didn't shake this time. I picked up the phone and called Victor. "They've made their move," I said. He sighed. "Then we make ours." Within days, Victor gathered every document, every text, every photo. He even found security footage from the wedding still lapsed. The silence, the reveal. "They'll never see this coming," he said. Meanwhile, the world already had. Someone from the wedding had posted the video online. Within hours, it went viral. Millions watched Savannah slap me across the face. Millions saw me stand up without screaming, without fighting, only walking out with calm. Comments flooded in. "That woman has more grace than anyone. She's what strength looks like. That bride should be ashamed." By the time the petition reached the court, the story had already spread across Nashville. The press called it the wedding slap scandal. On the day of the hearing, I wore the same blue dress I had worn at the wedding. Victor drove me to the courthouse. Cameras flashed as I stepped out. I kept my head high. Inside, the air was heavy. Across the room sat Caleb and Savannah with their lawyer. Savannah's face was stiff with makeup, but her eyes darted nervously. Caleb looked tired, his tie crooked. Their lawyer spoke first. "Your Honor, we will prove Mrs. Monroe's erratic behavior demonstrates declining mental capacity. She disrupted a wedding, caused public chaos, and made impulsive financial decisions." He handed over a few letters, statements from Savannah's relatives claiming I'd lost control. When it was our turn, my attorney stood. "Your Honor," he said, "we'd like to show a short video." The screen lit up with the ballroom scene, the slaps, the silence, me picking up my glasses, then returning with Victor and calmly presenting documents. Not one word of anger. Just truth. You could have heard a pin drop. Then my lawyer displayed Savannah's text messages. "You'll pay for this. I'll prove you're crazy." Another read, "I'll make you lose everything." Finally, he handed the judge a binder, the proof of my payments, the debts I covered, the receipts signed by Caleb himself. "This," my attorney said, "is not a woman who's lost her mind. This is a woman who's been exploited, humiliated, and finally fought back." The judge looked at me. "Mrs. Monroe," he said gently, "would you like to speak?" I stood. My knees were stiff, but my voice was clear. "Your Honor, I loved my son more than anything. I raised him alone. I taught him to be kind. But love does not mean giving up your dignity. I may be old, but I'm not helpless. I simply decided enough was enough." The judge nodded slowly. "Thank you." After reviewing the evidence, he brought down his gavel. Petition denied. The court finds no basis for incompetence. In fact, this is a clear case of financial and emotional abuse. The plaintiffs, Caleb and Savannah Monroe, will pay all legal costs. Gasps filled the courtroom. Savannah covered her face. Caleb looked down at his hands. I felt tears rise, but they were tears of freedom. Outside, reporters crowded the steps. Microphones pointed toward me. "Mrs. Monroe, what do you want to say to other older adults?" I took a breath. "Never let love make you blind to disrespect," I said. "Protect your peace, your home, your dignity." The crowd clapped softly. Cameras flashed. For the first time in years, I felt light. Days later, headlines appeared everywhere. Mother stands up to greedy couple. Bride slap backfires. Elder abuse exposed in Nashville court. The media called me the woman with unshakable calm. I didn't feel like a hero. I just felt like a survivor. Savannah lost most of her clients. No one wanted to hire a woman known for slapping her mother-in-law. Caleb lost his job soon after. Life had a way of balancing things. Victor came by one evening with a gentle smile. "You did it," he said. "You didn't just protect yourself. You made people listen." I smiled faintly. I didn't want fame. I just wanted peace. He nodded. "And now you have both." But peace, I learned, is not quiet. It's strength in motion. 1 week later, I received a call from a producer of a national talk show. "Mrs. Monroe," she said, "your story has inspired millions. Would you come share it on air?" My first thought was no. I was too old for lights and cameras. But then I remembered the messages from strangers, people thanking me for giving them the courage. So I said yes. The studio was bright, the audience warm. The host smiled at me. "Mrs. Monroe, what gave you the courage to stand up that night?" I paused, looked straight at the camera, and said, "Respect. Once you lose it, nothing else matters." The audience stood and clapped. Some cried. After the show aired, letters flooded my mailbox. From Texas, Florida, Oregon, older people sharing their own stories. Sons taking over savings. Daughters selling homes behind their backs. Grandchildren using their grandparents' names for loans. Every story had one thing in common: silence. I realized silence is what lets abuse grow. So I founded something new, the Monroe Shield Fund. Victor helped set it up, a nonprofit for older adults facing family exploitation. We opened a 24-hour helpline. We hired counselors, lawyers, and volunteers. Within months, we were getting hundreds of calls. One woman cried, saying her son had forged her signature to sell her car. Another man said his grandson drained his bank account. Each time I listened, my heart ached, but it also burned brighter. My pain had found its purpose. As the months passed, my story stopped being about shame and started being about change. I spoke at churches, community centers, even schools. Everywhere I went, people told me the same thing: "You gave us a voice." One fall evening, I stood on a small stage overlooking the Tennessee River, the same river I had stared at so many lonely nights. Behind me, banners read, "Protect dignity, protect home." In front of me sat hundreds of faces, young and old. I said softly, "Family should be a blessing, not a burden. Love must come with respect, or it's not love at all." Applause thundered. When the event ended, Victor walked up and handed me a single white rose. "For Harold," he said. I smiled. For every Harold and every Beatrice who stayed silent too long. But just when I thought my story had reached its peace, my phone buzzed again one morning. A number I knew by heart. Caleb. I stared at the screen. My heart tightened. I hesitated, then answered. "Mom," his voice cracked. "Please, I just need to talk." My breath caught. After everything, after the lies, the court, the humiliation, he still called me Mom. I whispered, "I'm listening." He took a shaky breath. "I made mistakes. I lost everything. Savannah's gone. I don't know where to go." For a moment, I said nothing. Then softly I asked, "Caleb, do you want comfort or do you want money?" He went silent. The line buzzed with static. "Both," he finally said. I closed my eyes. The ache in my chest returned. He hadn't changed. Not yet. "I can't help you with money," I said gently. But if someday you want to learn what respect really means, my door will be open." He didn't reply. The call ended. I looked out at the river. The sun was setting, turning the water gold. I thought of Harold's words, "When you're pushed into a corner, you find out who you are." I had found out. And deep down, I knew this story wasn't finished. For a few days after Caleb's call, my apartment felt quieter than usual. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft tick of the clock, the rustle, the balcony curtains, all sounded louder without conversation to fill the air. I brewed my black coffee each morning, sat by the window, and wondered if my son would ever call again, not for money, but for forgiveness. He didn't. Instead, a letter arrived. Plain white envelope, no return name, only a postmark from another state. Inside was a folded note and a small ultrasound picture. The note said, "Mom, Savannah is pregnant. I'm scared. I don't know what to do." My hands trembled. For a moment, all the anger drained out of me. I stared at the black and white image, tiny, blurry, but unmistakably a heartbeat beginning. My grandchild. A life untouched by greed, innocent of everything that had happened between us. I sat for a long time. Then I whispered, "A child is never to blame." But the next thought hit me like a wave. Savannah was going to use this baby. She would turn it into a reason to open old doors, to manipulate hearts again. I had to be careful. That evening, I called Victor. "She's pregnant," I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Congratulations, Beatrice. But remember, joy doesn't erase history. We'll need to prepare legally and emotionally." "I don't want to punish a baby," I said. "You won't," Victor answered softly. "You'll protect it the right way." Over the next weeks, I wrote letters. To myself, to the child who wasn't even born yet. I poured my heart out on paper, telling the story honestly, how love had been twisted, how silence became armor, how truth set me free. I kept those letters in a wooden box labeled for my grandchild, 2045. It was my promise that the truth would always exist, even if my voice someday didn't. Then one afternoon, a knock came at my door. When I opened it, Caleb stood there. He looked older, his shirt wrinkled, eyes sunken, hair uncombed. Behind him, Savannah waited, one hand on her belly, the other gripping her purse. "Mom," Caleb said quietly, "can we come in?" Every instinct told me to close the door, but I stepped aside. "You can come in, but we're keeping it civil." Savannah's smile was thin. "We're not here to fight," she said, her voice sweet but cautious. "We just need help." I folded my arms. Help comes in many forms. Which one are you asking for? Caleb's shoulders dropped. "Money," he admitted. Savannah added quickly, "It's for the baby, Mrs. Monroe. We need a better place. The doctor said stress isn't good." I looked at her stomach, then back into her eyes. "Stress comes from guilt, not from lack of furniture." Savannah flushed. "You can't hold a grudge forever. Families forgive." I nodded slowly. "Yes, they do. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting who people became." For a moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched so long that the ticking clock sounded like a drum. Then I said softly, "You'll get support, but not the way you think." From the drawer, I took a sealed envelope and handed it to Caleb. "This," I said, "is for the baby. A trust account managed by Victor. The funds will be released when the child turns 18, not before." Savannah's eyes widened. "That's ridiculous. We need it now." "No," I said firmly. "You want it now. The baby will need it later. That's the difference." Caleb looked down, guilt flickering across his face. "Mom, please," I held up my hand. "This is not punishment. It's protection. One day you'll understand." Savannah turned away, muttering, "You'll die alone with your rules." I smiled sadly. Better alone with peace than surrounded by people who see me as a wallet. They left without another word. The hallway echoed with their fading steps. When the door closed, I leaned against it, breathing hard. My legs shook, not from fear, but from the weight of love that hurts. That night, I stood on the balcony watching the city lights blink on. Somewhere out there, My grandchild was growing. Somewhere, my son was lost, chasing the same illusions that once blinded me, thinking money could fix what respect had broken. Weeks turned into months. Letters came now and then, mostly from strangers who had seen my story online. They called me Miss B, a nickname from the talk show. They sent stories of their own heartbreaks and recoveries. Some mailed flowers. Some just said, "You gave me courage." One evening, Victor visited with paperwork. "We received state recognition," he said proudly. "The Monroe Shield Fund is now an official organization." We celebrated with tea and cinnamon cookies. Victor laughed. "Harold would be proud, you know." I looked at the river outside and nodded. He'd tell me to rest before starting the next battle. But battles have a way of finding you. A month later, Savannah called. Her voice trembled. "Mrs. Monroe, I'm in the hospital." My heart skipped. What happened? She whispered complications. They said I might lose the baby. Everything inside me went still. Whatever anger I had dissolved instantly. "Which hospital?" I asked. When I arrived, Savannah lay pale on the bed. Caleb sat beside her, face buried in his hands. He looked up when he saw me, surprised, almost ashamed. "Mom," he said hoarsely, "you came." "Of course I did," I said. "A child is a blessing, no matter who carries it." Savannah turned her head toward me. "Why are you here?" she asked weakly. "Because this isn't about us," I said gently. "It's about the life you're holding." For hours I stayed, speaking softly to calm her while the doctors worked. The baby survived. When Savannah finally slept, Caleb whispered, "Thank you, Mom. I don't deserve you." "You're right," I said, touching his hand. "But you can earn it back." He nodded, tears rolling silently down his face. When I left the hospital that night, the stars seemed brighter than usual. For the first time in years, I felt a small door opening, fragile, uncertain, but real. Maybe redemption had room even for us. Days later, Savannah gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Harold, after my husband. When I held that child for the first time, something broke and healed at the same time. His tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and I whispered, "Welcome to the world, little one. You're the hope we almost lost." Caleb stood nearby, watching quietly. The guilt in his eyes had softened into gratitude. I saw a hint of the boy he once was. For a few months, peace returned. We met often, always at neutral places, parks, cafes, the hospital garden. I watched Caleb learn to hold his son, awkward but tender. Savannah, surprisingly, was calm. Maybe motherhood had changed her, maybe not. Then one day, Victor called urgently. "Beatrice, we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Savannah's been moving money," he said. "She tried to open a new account under the baby's trust number. It was blocked, but she's getting clever." I felt my heart sink. So it wasn't change. It was strategy. "Let it play out," I said quietly. "If she crosses the line again, we'll act." A week later it happened. Savannah forged a letter claiming I'd approved an early withdrawal for medical expenses. The bank verified her signature. It was fake. When Victor showed me the copy, I felt tired, not angry. "She's learned nothing," I said. He nodded. "Do you want to press charges?" I looked out the window, the sun dipping behind the skyline. "Not yet, but I won't let her steal the child's future." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk writing another letter for my grandchild. Sometimes love and danger wear the same face. Don't let anyone twist your kindness into weakness. The next morning, Savannah showed up at my door again, eyes red, hair unkempt. "You ruined me," she shouted. "Everyone thinks I'm a thief." I opened the door wider. "You forged my name, Savannah? You did that yourself." She trembled. "You could fix this if you wanted to." "I already fixed it," I said. "I protected your son's future." Her expression changed. "My son. He's our son. You'll never control him." "I don't want control," I said softly. "I want him safe." For a moment, I saw confusion in her eyes, then anger replaced it. She stormed off, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. Victor arrived later with a grim face. "She's threatening to sue again," he said. "Let her," I replied calmly. Truth and shake. Weeks passed. Savannah filed the claim, but it failed instantly. The evidence was too clear, the forgery too obvious. After that, she disappeared from the city with the baby. Caleb called me in tears. "Mom, she's gone. She took Harold. I don't even know where." I felt my knees weaken. "She won't hurt him," I whispered. She wants control, not chaos. But days turned into weeks. No word, no photo, nothing. I hired a private investigator, though Victor warned me it might take time. Every night I sat by the window, staring at the river, praying. Please, God, keep him safe. One morning, the investigator called. "Mrs. Monroe, we found her. She's in Memphis, staying under her cousin's name." I didn't hesitate. Within hours, I was in Victor's car, driving west under a sky heavy with gray clouds. When we arrived, Savannah's cousin opened the door, startled. "She left early this morning," she said. "Took the baby and a suitcase." My heart dropped. "Where?" The woman shrugged. She didn't say, but she looked desperate. Back in the car, Victor put a hand on my shoulder. "We'll find them." By evening, the police issued an alert. The stress was so heavy, I felt my chest tighten. That night, sitting in a motel room, I thought of Harold's photo in my wallet. "If I die before I see that child again," I whispered, "please watch over him." 2 days later, my phone rang. A small voice, "Caleb." "Mom," she called me. "She's in Arkansas. She wants to meet." My pulse quickened. "Where?" She said at a rest stop near the border. "She'll bring Harold. She wants to talk about custody." Victor frowned. "It could be a trap." "I know," I said, "but I have to go." When we arrived, the sun was setting. The rest area was nearly empty except for a few cars. Savannah stood near a picnic table, holding the baby. She looked thinner, worn. "Mrs. Monroe," she said quietly as I approached, "I don't want to fight anymore." I studied her face. "Then why run?" She looked down. "I thought if I left, I could start over. But everywhere I go, people know my name. They know what I did." She handed me the baby. "You take him. You'll do better than me." I froze. "Savannah," tears rolled down her cheeks. "Tell him I loved him, even if I didn't know how." As she turned and walked toward her car, I called out, "Wait." She looked back once, whispered goodbye, and drove away into the fading light. I held the baby close, his tiny fingers gripping my scarf. He smelled like milk and sunlight. My tears fell onto his blanket. "You're safe now," I murmured. "You're home." Back in Nashville, custody was formalized through the court. Caleb signed willingly, saying he wasn't ready to raise a child alone. Savannah didn't appear. For the first time in a long time, my home felt alive again, the sound of baby laughter filling corners that had known too much silence. I renamed my flower shop Harold's Garden. Customers loved the change. They'd ask, "Who's Harold?" And I'd smile. "My husband and now my grandson." Years passed in steady rhythm. Diapers turned to picture books to school uniforms. Harold grew curious, bright, and kind. Sometimes when he laughed, I saw flashes of my husband in him, the same spark, the same gentleness. But peace has shadows. One afternoon, while I was watering the balcony plants, my phone buzzed. Unknown number? I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. "Mrs. Monroe?" a voice said. "This is Detective Rogers from Memphis. We think we found Savannah's car near the river. You may need to come." The world tilted. My wiring pin slipped, spilling wire across the floor. "Is she?" "We're not sure yet," he said gently. "We'll confirm soon." I hung up, heart pounding. My mind replayed our last meeting, the way she looked back, the way she said goodbye. That night, I sat with little Harold asleep beside me. I whispered, "Whatever happens, you'll always be loved." The next morning, Victor arrived early. His face told me everything before he spoke. "They found her, Bee," he said quietly. She's gone? I closed my eyes. The room spun. I felt both grief and relief tangled together. She had been my enemy and my daughter-in-law, my pain and my mirror. She destroyed and taught at the same time. Caleb came later that day. He stood at the door, eyes swollen. "Mom," he whispered, "what have we done?" I hugged him. For the first time in years, he let me. After the funeral, we sat by the river in silence. The wind moved the water gently, the same way time moves pain, slow, invisible, but constant. Caleb looked at me. "I want to start over," he said. "Not for me, for him." He pointed to Harold, who was throwing pebbles near the edge. I smiled faintly. "Then start by being present." He nodded. "Will you help me?" "Yes," I said, "but you'll have to earn trust the same way you lost it, slowly." From that day, Caleb visited every weekend. He played with Harold, fixed small things around my apartment, even brought groceries. The guilt in his eyes didn't vanish, but effort began to replace it. One evening, while we were having dinner, Caleb looked up suddenly. "Mom," he said, "can I move back home? Just for a while?" I studied his face. For years, that question would have filled me with fear. Now it only brought caution. "Not yet," I said softly. "You still have things to prove to yourself, not to me." He smiled sadly. Fair. Life settled into a rhythm again, quieter, steadier. The Monroe Shield Fund kept growing. We opened new offices, trained volunteers, built partnerships with local police. My story became a case study in universities. I sometimes stood at podiums speaking to young lawyers. "Don't look away when age meets exploitation," I tell them. But every night, after speeches and applause, I came home to my quiet apartment and tucked Harold into bed. His small hand would hold mine until he fell asleep. And in that simple touch, I found the peace all the wealth in the world could never give. Still, some nights, when the city was silent, I'd hear echoes of the past, the slap, the gasps, the whispers, and I'd remind myself that pain built the strength that protects us now. One spring morning, Harold, now 6, ran to me with a drawing. "Grandma Bee, that's you and me and Daddy fixing the garden." I smiled, tears in my eyes. "It's perfect, honey." He tilted his head. "Will Mommy ever come back?" I froze. The words caught in my throat. Finally, I said, "She's in heaven, sweetheart. But she's watching you grow." He nodded, satisfied with the innocence of a child. Later that night, I stood on the balcony again, the river glimmering below. Victor had once told me, grief never ends, it just changes shape. He was right. Mine had become gratitude. I whispered into the wind, "Harold, I kept my promise." And as if the night itself heard me, a gentle breeze brushed my face, warm and soft, carrying the scent of lavender from my garden. For a while, I thought this was the end of my story. But destiny, it seemed, still had one more secret waiting in the shadows, something buried deep in my late husband's old files, something that would reopen everything I thought I had already healed. What Beatrice discovers in her husband's forgotten papers will change her understanding of love, loyalty, and betrayal forever. I found the old box one quiet afternoon. The sun was spilling through the window, turning the dust into floating gold. Harold's brown leather briefcase had been sitting in the back of my closet for more than a decade. I used to tell myself I'd open it someday, but someday kept moving further away. That day, I don't know why, but my hands went straight to it. Maybe because Harold's birthday was near, or maybe because the silence of the apartment had grown heavy again. I placed the briefcase on the table, wiped the thin layer of dust, and opened the rusty latch. Inside were folders, notes, and 2 sealed envelopes. One said private, for Beatrice only. My breath caught. Harold's handwriting, neat, steady, unmistakable. I hadn't seen it in years. My fingers traced each letter like a prayer. I sat down slowly, the room quiet except for the faint tick of the clock. Then I opened it. Inside was a letter written in blue ink, a little faded but perfectly legible. "My dearest Bee, if you are reading this, it means I couldn't tell you these words myself. You always trusted me with the money, the investments, the plans. But there's something I never shared, not out of deceit, but out of fear that it might hurt you. I froze. Fear? Hurt? My eyes moved faster. Years ago, before Caleb was born, I made a business partnership with a man named Richard Hale. He was a friend at first, then he became something else, dangerous. He took money from me, large sums, and hid it under shell companies. I fought quietly to get it back. I never told you because I didn't want to burden you. But B, if one day something seems strange about our investments, check the file marked Lakefield Trust. It will lead you to what's ours, and maybe what's his. The letter ended with Harold's familiar closing line. Whatever happens, remember, you are always the safe place. I sat there staring at the page. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Harold, my gentle husband, the man who avoided even small arguments, had hidden a storm behind his cunning face. I rummaged through the briefcase again and found the folder he'd mentioned, Lakefield Trust. Inside were copies of property deeds, contracts, and one small black notebook filled with Harold's tight handwriting. At the bottom of the folder was a business card. It read, Richard Hale and Associates, Nashville. The name felt familiar. My heart skipped. I had heard it before, but where? Then I remembered. A donation letter. Months earlier, the Monroe Shield Fund had received a generous anonymous contribution through an office with that same name. Victor had shown it to me proudly. Some businessman who admires your story, he had said. Now the name felt like a ghost coming back. I called Victor right away. Do you remember that donation from Richard Hale and Associates? Yes, he said slowly. Why? I think that man was Harold's old partner, and I think something's wrong. Within an hour, Victor was at my apartment. I laid out the documents on the table, the letter, the contracts, the notebook. He adjusted his glasses, scanning each line. His expression darkened. B, he said carefully, this isn't just old business. Look, these documents are tied to a property company still operating. If Harold's name is still attached, it could explain some of the irregular transfers we've been seeing. Irregular transfers? I repeated. Victor nodded. For months, someone's been moving small sums, 500 here, 1,000 there, from an old investment account under Harold's name. I assumed it was just automated interest payments, but now my stomach twisted. You think someone's stealing from his estate? Maybe, Victor said. Or maybe someone's keeping it alive for a reason. We decided to trace it. Over the next few days, Victor worked with his contacts. He discovered that Lakefield Trust still owned a piece of land by the river, registered under both Harold Monroe and Richard Hale. After Harold's death, no one updated the ownership. The land was technically still half ours and half Richard's. But here's what chilled me. A week before our discovery, someone had tried to sell it, using forged documents. Victor looked up from the screen. B, this isn't random. Whoever's doing this knows your story, your fame. They probably think you won't notice a quiet transaction in the background. I sat back, the realization hitting me like cold water. It's Caleb, isn't it? Victor hesitated. We can't be sure yet. But I knew. A mother always knows. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in Harold's armchair, the letter still in my lap. The moonlight fell across the page and I whispered, You were right, Harold. The storm didn't end. It just changed shape. The next morning, I drove to Caleb's apartment. He opened the door, surprised. Mom, you okay? I found something, I said, stepping inside. Something about your father. He looked uneasy. What kind of something? Business records. Investments. Do you know anyone named Richard Hale? Caleb's face went blank for half a second. Then too quickly he said, No, the lie was small but sharp. Caleb, I said softly, don't lie to me. Not this time. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. All right, I know the name. Savannah introduced me to one of his agents months ago. They said they could help restructure my debts. I thought it was harmless. Harmless? I repeated, my voice rising for the first time in months. You gave access to your father's records. I didn't know, he snapped back. They said they already had authorization. They showed papers with Dad's signature. I closed my eyes, forcing calm. Those signatures are fake. Harold never worked with anyone after you were born. Caleb's shoulders slumped. Mom, I'm sorry. I thought I could fix things myself. I didn't want to drag you back into it. It's too late, I said quietly. They're using his name to steal from us. He sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. I keep making it worse. I wanted to be angry, but what I felt was older than anger. It was sorrow, the kind that settles into your bones. That evening, Victor confirmed that the buyer's representative for the forged sale was a man named Lucas Hale, Richard Hale's son, the same man who had posed as Savannah's financial advisor months before the wedding. The puzzle pieces locked into place. Savannah had been working with him all along. Victor exhaled slowly. V, this is bigger than a family dispute. These people have been targeting you for years. Savannah was just their doorway. I felt the blood drain from my face. They used my son, my name, my trust. He nodded. And they almost succeeded. We went straight to the authorities. The investigation began quietly but swiftly. Within a week, the Hales were under scrutiny for multiple fraud cases involving elderly victims, using fake caregiving offers in forged inheritance papers. The story broke in the papers. Monroe Widow exposes statewide fraud ring. I saw my own photo under the headline again, and for the first time, it didn't make me feel small. It made me feel like Harold was still watching, guiding my hands. But the battle wasn't over. One night, Victor called, his voice tense. B, you need to leave your apartment for a few days. Someone's been following you. Following? He explained that a security camera near the Monroe Fund office had captured a man loitering, same face as Lucas Hale. The police aren't it, Victor said, but I want you safe. I packed a small bag and went to stay with Mrs. Whitaker, my old neighbor. Her spare room smelled like chamomile and old books. She held my hand. You fought enough wars, B. Maybe this one will finally end. I hope so, I whispered, but peace was never that easy. 2 nights later, someone tried to break into my apartment. The security guard scared him off before he entered, but he left a note taped to the door. Just one line, some treasures should stay buried. When the police showed it to me, my knees nearly gave out. It was written in handwriting that looked just like Harold's. My heart pounded. It's a trick, I said. It has to be. Victor nodded, but his face was pale. They're trying to shake you. It worked. That night, lying in Mrs. Whitaker's guest bed, I kept seeing Harold's handwriting in my mind, the blue ink from the letter, the calm tone that used to soothe me. Could it be that somewhere, somehow, he had known more than he told me? At dawn, I drove back to the apartment against Victor's advice. The police had already cleared the area, but I needed to see it myself. The door frame still had scratches from the attempt. On the table, Harold's briefcase sat exactly where I'd left it. I opened it again, searching for something, anything that might explain the note. At the very bottom, under a false lining, I found a small key. It was old, brass, with a tiny engraving, L23. I stared at it, puzzled. L23, then it clicked. Lakefield Property, Unit 23. The land Harold owned with Richard Hale. I called Victor. I'm going there, I said. He protested. At least wait for the police. I can't, I said. This is my husband's story, and mine. The drive to Lakefield took 2 hours. The property sat near the water, an old warehouse now half abandoned. The sun was setting, painting the walls orange and gold. I parked near the gate, heart thudding. The padlock on the side door matched the key perfectly. It turned with a quiet click. Inside, the air smelled of dust and seaweed. Wooden crates lined the walls, most empty, but one corner had a small metal cabinet marked L23 Trust. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside were stacks of old documents and a single black box. When I lifted it, a faint rattling came from inside. I set it on a crate and opened the lid. There were rolls of film, photographs, and another envelope with my name. B, if you ever find this, it means you've gone further than I hoped you'd need to. The Hales will never stop chasing what they think I hid. But the real treasure isn't money. It's proof. Proof that they use me and hundreds of others to launder funds through elder accounts. Keep this box safe. If it ever resurfaces, they'll come for it again. Ash. I covered my mouth, trembling. The film rolls, each labeled with dates and numbers, were evidence. Harold had kept everything, even after he fell ill. He died protecting it. A noise snapped me out of my thoughts, a footstep behind me. I turned. A man stood at the doorway, Lucas Hale. "Well," he said, his smile thin. "Mrs. Monroe, I was wondering when you'd get here." I stepped back, clutching the box. "You're trespassing." He laughed. "So are you. That's technically my father's property, remember?" "This belongs to Harold," I said, "and I'm taking it." He took a step closer. "That box can destroy everything we've built. Give it to me, and you walk away untouched." I tightened my grip. "No." His eyes narrowed. "You think the police will believe an old widow over a corporation? You'll be forgotten before the ink dries." I forced my voice steady. "You said the same thing about Harold, didn't you?" He stopped. "What?" I opened the envelope and pulled out one of the photographs, a picture of Richard Hale shaking hands with local officials, dates written on the back matching illegal transfers. "This is what you're afraid of?" I said. "This isn't just business fraud. It's criminal." Lucas lunged forward, grabbing for the box. We struggled, the metal edges digging into my palms. Then headlights flashed across the room, Victor's car screeching to a stop outside. "B," he shouted, running in with 2 officers behind him. Lucas froze, then bolted toward the back door. One officer tackled him before he made it 3 steps. The box slipped from my hands and clattered onto the floor, unharmed. I sank onto a crate, shaking. Victor knelt beside me. "You all right?" I nodded weakly. "I think Harold just saved us again." The police took the box as evidence. The next months were a blur of hearings and investigations. The Hells were charged with multiple counts of fraud and money laundering. My husband's hidden files became the cornerstone of the case. Reporters called again, asking for interviews. I agreed to one, just one. On camera, I said simply, "My husband spent his life protecting others' futures. I spent mine protecting his legacy. Together, we found justice." The nation watched. Donations to the Monroe Shield Fund tripled overnight. Laws were proposed to tighten protection over senior finances. Harold's name became synonymous with integrity. But even with victory came exhaustion. One evening, sitting on the balcony with little Harold asleep inside, I whispered, "We did it, love. It's finally over." A gentle breeze moved through the geraniums, as if he were answering. Yet deep down, I knew that peace never stays forever. Because the next morning, when I checked my mailbox, I found a small envelope with no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. It showed me standing in the Lakefield warehouse the night before, holding the black box. Someone had been there, watching. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The photo trembled in my hand. It was glossy, new, taken from the same angle where Victor's headlights had first flashed into the warehouse. That meant whoever snapped it had been standing behind us, hidden in the dark. I locked the door, drew the curtains, and sat at the kitchen table. The city outside hummed softly, unaware that my peace had cracked again. Whoever sent that picture wanted me afraid. And maybe, for a few seconds, it worked. But then I looked toward the framed photo of Harold and whispered, "We didn't come this far to live in fear." I called Victor. "They know where I live," I said. He arrived within an hour, carrying 2 cups of coffee and his usual calm. "B," he said gently, "the police traced the photo paper. It's from a self-service print shop near the courthouse. They're checking security footage." I nodded, gripping the mug. What if it's one of Hale's men? What if he wasn't working alone? Victor sighed. "That's likely. Fraud rings don't vanish overnight. But you have protection now. Cameras, patrols, neighbors. You're safe." Safe. The word sounded thin. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the floor, every car outside felt like a warning. At dawn, I stepped onto the balcony to breathe. The air was cold and clean. The river glimmered under the pink morning light, calm as if nothing evil could ever touch it. I thought of Harold again, the man who built a quiet fortune not from greed, but from steadiness. He had hidden evidence to save others, even after death. Maybe this last shadow was the final piece of his unfinished mission. By mid-morning, the police called. "Mrs. Monroe, we reviewed the print shop footage. The man who developed the photo used a cap and mask, but we traced the car. It's registered to someone named Douglas Hale." "Another Hale?" I asked. "Yes, Richard's nephew. Another branch of the same poison tree." Victor arranged for extra security at my apartment and the fund office. Reporters tried to spin the story again, the widow and the shadow. I ignored them. My focus was on Harold's grandson, my little Harold. I wouldn't let the darkness reach him. Weeks passed quietly. Caleb continued visiting, helping with repairs and volunteering at the Monroe Shield Fund. Seeing him kneel beside strangers, listening without pride, softened something inside me. Maybe redemption truly ran in the blood if watered enough by guilt. One Saturday afternoon, we held a small charity fair near the river. Families came with children. Old couples strolled between flower stalls. I stood behind the booth for Harold's Garden, selling potted lavender for donations. As I handed a plant to a young mother, I noticed a man leaning against a lamppost, half hidden behind balloons, sunglasses, ball cap, watching me. I froze. Then slowly I lifted my phone and pretended to take a selfie. The camera caught him clearly. When I lowered the phone, he turned away and melted into the crowd. Victor reviewed the photo that evening. "That's him," he said grimly. "Douglas Hale." The police increased surveillance again, but the man vanished like smoke. For a while, everything calmed. Then 3 weeks later, the real storm began. It started with a letter, delivered not by mail but slid under my door. Plain paper typed message, "You still have what's ours. Meet at the river pier, midnight. Come alone. Bring the box." I read it twice. My instinct said to call Victor, but another part of me, the part that had faced flops, lawsuits, and lies, wanted to finish this myself. Still, I wasn't reckless. I left a note for Victor. "If I'm not home by 1 a.m., come to the pier." At 11:30 p.m., I tucked Harold's black evidence box into my bag and drove toward the river. The night was windless. The water shimmered under the streetlights like sheets of glass. A figure waited near the old pier post. Douglas Hale. "Mrs. Monroe," he said softly as I approached. "You should have stayed quiet. You had money, fame, peace. Why dig deeper?" I stopped a few steps away. "Because silence lets men like you grow rich while others lose everything." He smirked. "Your husband understood business. You ruined his legacy with petty projects." I felt heat rise in my chest. "You don't know my husband." He tilted his head. "Don't I? He made deals with us once. We built Lakefield Trust together." "That's a lie." He shrugged. "Maybe. But who'll prove it? He's dead." I held up the bag. "This will." His smile vanished. "Give it here." "No." He took a step closer. The pier creaked under his boots. "You think the police scare me? They're paid, half of them. This ends tonight." Before I could reply, lights flared behind me, car headlights cutting across the dark. Victor's voice boomed. "Police! Step away from her." Douglas spun, startled. 2 officers moved in from both sides. He lunged toward the edge, tried to jump into the river, but slipped. For a terrifying second, I saw his hands grasp the railing, then disappear. The splash echoed across the still water. The officers shone flashlights over the edge. Only ripples remained. They searched for hours but never found him. When dawn broke, I sat on a bench, wrapped in a blanket. Victor sat beside me. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, he said, "It's over." I nodded slowly. "I've heard that before." He looked at me, tired but smiling. This time, I believe it. In the following weeks, investigators confirmed the Hale network had collapsed. Their accounts were frozen. Their partners disappeared into indictments. The black box of evidence, Harold's last safeguard, was sealed in federal custody. For the first time in decades, there were no more secrets left in our name. Caleb visited one evening carrying a tray of lasagna. "Homemade," he said shyly. We ate on the balcony as little Harold chased fireflies with the jar. The air smelled of lavender. "Mom," Caleb said quietly, "you saved us again?" I smiled faintly. "No, son." This time we saved each other. He reached across the table and took my hand. His palm was rough now from real work. "You think Dad knows?" I looked toward the river. "He knows." Life settled into warmth again. The Monroe Shield Fund opened its 10th branch. I retired from daily management, passing it to younger leaders who had once been clients. Victor became honorary director, though he insisted he'd still drop by for coffee. Each morning, I still brewed my single cup, watered the balcony plants, and whispered a prayer of gratitude. The pain had turned into purpose, and purpose into peace. But every piece carries echoes. One autumn afternoon, while sorting Harold's papers for an exhibition at the fund's new office, I found a small sealed envelope tucked inside an old diary. It wasn't Harold's handwriting this time, it was Caleb's. "Mom, if you're reading this after I'm gone, please know I tried to make it right. There's one thing I never told you. The day Savannah met Richard Hale, it was my fault. I took a loan from him years before. She only followed my mess. I thought I could repay it, but every favor came with another chain. I'm sorry for dragging our family into their world." Tears blurred the words. At the bottom he had added, "You once said respect matters more than money. You were right. I hope someday Harold grows up to see what real strength looks like, and it's not in men like me." I pressed the letter to my heart. "You found your peace, son," I whispered. That night, I took Harold to the riverbank. He was 8 now, curious, bright, asking endless questions about everything. "Grandma B," he said, "why do you always look at the water?" "Because," I answered, smiling, "that's where memories live. They move, but they never disappear." He threw a pebble into the water and watched the ripples spread. "So memories are like circles?" "Yes," I said softly. "They keep moving until they touch everything." He nodded thoughtfully. "Then Grandpa's circles are still going." I smiled through tears. "Yes, sweetheart, they are." Years drifted by like that river. When Harold turned 18, the trust I had created opened for him, just as promised. He didn't buy cars or gadgets. Instead, he joined the Monroe Shield Fund as a volunteer. "I want to help people like you did," he said. I laughed. "Then you'd better learn patience." He grinned. "I have your blood, Grandma. I'll be fine." Watching him walk into the same office where I had once fought my battles filled me with a peace so deep it almost hurt. Sometimes I'd sit on that same balcony, older now, hands wrinkled, hair silver, and think about everything that had happened. The slap, the courtroom, the warehouse, the shadows. It all seemed like another lifetime. One evening, Victor visited. He was slower now too, leaning on a cane but still sharp-eyed. We shared tea as the sun dipped low. "Do you ever regret it, B?" he asked. "Which part?" "Standing up that night, exposing your family, losing so much to gain peace." I looked at him, smiled faintly. "No, I regret waiting so long to start." He chuckled. "You know, they still use your case in training seminars." "Then maybe the next woman won't wait." We watched the river in silence. The breeze carried the scent of wet earth and distant lilacs. Later that night, after Victor left, I walked through the apartment turning off lights. In Harold's room, my grandson, now grown, I saw framed photos, one of his parents, one of me and Harold Sr. on our wedding day. Next to them sat a new one, me holding baby Harold on the day he was born. The circle complete. I sat by the window, opened my journal, and wrote one last entry. "When the world took my silence for weakness, I learned that truth spoken gently can still shake the walls of lies. Money fades, beauty fades, even memory fades, but dignity, once reclaimed, lights the path for those who follow." I closed the journal and exhaled slowly. The city lights shimmered like fallen stars. Somewhere, church bells rang softly, marking midnight, the same hour I had once faced darkness at the pier. Now that darkness felt far away, powerless. As I stood, a knock came at the door. My heart skipped. Old instincts never die. But when I opened it, a young woman stood there holding a small bouquet of flowers. "Mrs. Monroe?" she asked shyly. "I work at the Monroe Shield Fund. I just wanted to thank you. My mother called your hotline 2 years ago. You saved her." Tears welled in my eyes. I accepted the flowers. "You saved yourself, dear. We just answered the phone." She smiled and I left. I closed the door and placed the bouquet beside Harold's photo. The petals caught the lamplight, glowing like tiny suns. Outside, the river murmured its endless song. I whispered, "Harold, Caleb, Savannah, wherever you are, I hope you found rest." Because I finally have. The wind moved softly through the curtains, lifting the edge of the journal page as if turning it itself. I smiled. Maybe it was Harold's way of saying well done. I sat down, watching it fade into a pale blue dawn. After everything, the betrayal, the battles, the fear, what remained was simple peace, purpose, and love that survived the noise. And maybe that's how every story should end. Not with applause, not with revenge, but with quiet strength and a river still moving forward. And that's how Beatrice Monroe's story came to an end. Not with shouting, not with revenge, but with peace. After all the betrayal, the courtroom fights, and the long nights of fear, she found something bigger than victory. She found herself again. Her story reminds us that dignity has no age, and silence is never weakness. Sometimes the loudest strength is quiet courage, the kind that stands alone and still shines. So this story touched your heart. If you believe that respect and love should always win over greed and lies, take 1 second right now, hit the like button. It really helps more people see stories like this. And if you want more real emotional stories that speak to the soul, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell because next week, another powerful story is coming your way. Until then, take care of yourself, respect those who stood by you, and remember, peace is the richest thing we can ever own.